Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and the author of the best-selling Codist, the story behind what happens to your DNA and why it matters to Satan. If you've never read a biblical thriller before that's straight out of the Bible and why your DNA is something that you've been sending off to 23andMe and Satan is interested in, you need to get a copy. The second edition is out. First edition sold out. Second edition on sale right now, $2.99 on Kindle. Also, if you visit ignitinganation.com and scroll on the special offers, you'll find a cover of my latest book, The 7 Laws of Abundant Living, Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life. I take you on a journey from the natural into the supernatural right there in the Garden of Eden at the Tree of Life, beginning with the ground, taking you all the way out to the fruit. This is a must-buy, a must-read, great Bible study being used in women's centers all over the world and now available in Indonesia. It's my privilege to welcome Doug Hershey to the program. Doug is an author, conference speaker, and founder of Ezra Adventures, an Israel-focused travel and education company. From years of hand-on experience cultivating local relationships in Israel and love for history, he provides unique perspective on the Jewish scriptures and present-day Israel. He's based out of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. When he's not in Israel with Ezra Adventures, he's speaking in churches and synagogues. For more information, you can go to EzraAdventures.com. His latest book, Israel Rising, Ancient Prophecy, Modern Lens, is a photographic journey of celebrating 70 years of Israel independence and a fulfillment of a prophecy from Ezekiel. Doug Hershey, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thanks for having me on.
It's a privilege and an honor to meet you. You and I share a number of friends in common, and as you know, I just got back from Israel myself, taking a group of 48, but you actually take more smaller, intimate journeys into the land, which was really like my first trip there. I did almost 200 sites in 10 days to create a checklist. I mean, I would pull in, pull out, and say, nope, I'm not going there. Yep, I'm going there. Nope, I'm not. And it was an amazing experience to have been involved with that. Give me a little background as to, I'm from Pittsburgh. I'm a Penn State alum. I know exactly where you live. Spoke at the Messiah Conference there in Grantham, not far from you, many times. What was it that was really the impetus behind this particular project with photographer Elise Theriault?
Elise
Theriault.
Yeah. Part of the excitement for me, not only with the book, but being in the land with Ezra Adventures, with taking small groups, is really seeing the land change. Before my eyes, I've been taking groups for most recently the past 4 or 5 years, but I've been back and forth to Israel for the last 20. And there's been multiple locations that every time I go back, whether they be archaeological sites or more specifically different valleys, like driving down the Jordan Valley is one of my favorite spots, going from the Galilee down to the Dead Sea. As you well know, 10 years ago, I mean, you would cross just south of Bet Shean, and you'd get out into the desert, and it would be brown for the next hour or two until you come over the little ridge looking into Jericho. And it's really not like that so much anymore. The last couple of years, there's been vineyards and date palm orchards and fields, all of these things that have begun really blooming. And I began, as I've been in the scriptures, I began, again, reading Ezekiel and began putting some pieces together and went, I wonder if this is what Ezekiel was talking about. So much of the land is reviving, and really for the first time, coming back to life in a way that really has never been before.
You have created this, I think it's a monumental project. This is a must-have pictorial view of ancient prophecy, and what people don't realize is that the entire land is prophetic.
That's right.
There's over a little bit over 2,500 prophecies in the Bible, and about 2,000 of them have been fulfilled. And in my day, starting in the early 50s, I'm part of the first post-Holocaust generation, these prophecies are being fulfilled in Israel like never before. I mean, we'd have to go back 2,000 years to the last 4 days of Jesus' life to see that many prophecies unfolding in such rapid fire. Now, you were gripped by this particular prophecy that you were able to connect to your visual encounter as you traveled through the land. The idea behind this was to capture the fulfillment of this prophecy and to correlate it, as you do in the book, to what Mark Twain's observations were back in the late 1800s. Why don't you walk us through both the prophecy and Mark Twain's evaluation of the land?
Sure. In Ezekiel 36, it's really a unique chapter in the Bible. It talks about God telling Ezekiel to prophesy to the land. And we often think of prophecy as being to nations or to people or, or to kings or, just people in general. But God is saying specifically, speak to the land, speak to the mountains, to the hills, to the ravines and the valleys. And in essence, what he's saying is that when the Jewish people are out of the land, it'll be desolate, it'll be forgotten. Places will, it'll just be a wasteland. When the Jewish people return, the land will put forth branches and produce fruit. The forgotten cities will be rebuilt. God will multiply man and beast on the land and just cause everything to bloom. And it's really speaking to the land and saying, when my people return, it's saying you will be cultivated and sown and you'll be treated better than what you were at the first. And so just that in itself is really significant. And as you know, from the very first covenant, in Genesis 15, when God appears to Abram and says, I want to make a covenant with you, Abram's response isn't, how will I know that you'll be my God? Or how will I know that you'll multiply my descendants? His question is, how do I know that you'll give me this piece of land? And because of that question to God, God says, okay, go get these animals and we'll start the covenant process. But my point is that the entire original covenant that we refer to as the everlasting covenant is really connecting Abram's descendants to that land. But specifically, the reason that the covenant was made was because of the land. And so here in Ezekiel 36, God is specifically speaking to the land and saying, when my people return, you as the physical land will respond. And so part of the book, what I have in there, not only with Mark Twain has some fascinating stuff, but there's almost 2,000 years of eyewitness accounts from almost every century, from Christians, Muslims, and Jews, describing what it looked like. Now, Mark Twain, in 1867, or a little bit before that, he goes through the land, and I think that he's really kind of stunned at what he finds. It's empty, it's desolate. He talks about being up north in the Hula Valley and saying we could travel 10 miles in any direction. There's no sign of habitation. We're not seeing another human being. Talks about seeing sheep on the other side of a hillside, and he says they have to be eating gravel because there's nothing else for them to eat. And saying things like even the cactus, and I'm paraphrasing, but even the cactus and the olive tree, which normally grow in this type of soil, there's nothing around. It's just completely empty and desolate. And so he's writing almost from an exasperated point of view. I think that he's saying even Jerusalem has none of its former glory, and he's almost lamenting over the fact that anything that was written about this land was only in biblical times. It was long gone.
As you're saying that, and of course I've quoted these passages from Mark Twain every time I'm in Israel, but for the first time, I actually see the report coming to Nehemiah, saying that the walls are torn down, the city is in despair, it's desolate, and you've got to come back to serve your people, and to not only to serve them, but to rule over them. And he calls for the rebuilding of the walls, and in a miraculous period of time, the walls are built. They fight off by insurmountable odds, the same way we have been fighting all the way through the 6-Day War, and
that's right,
and be against all odds of every nation coming against us. What's interesting about the Genesis 15 mandate, and that's really the biblical mandate, is that Christians who are anti-Israel or in any way anti-Jesus Jewish, are anti-Jesus and actually anti-God, because this covenant in Genesis 15, which included all of Syria, all of Lebanon,
That's right.
three-quarters of Iraq, all of Jordan, northern Saudi Arabia, and northern Egypt, including the Sinai up through Gaza, all of that was this covenant promise, and the engrafting of the Gentiles is their inheritance is the land. That is what the Abrahamic promise was this land. Now,
Yes.
Israel's in 1/12. The Balfour Declaration was originally structured to give them the Genesis 15 biblically mandated borders. And
That's right.
because there was an individual in the oil industry who interceded and fought against it because he didn't want to lose the oil, follow the money, they gave them 1/12. And over the period of time from the Balfour Declaration to today, it's been even reduced greater in these massive movements of land for peace. And there's never going to be a land for peace, because God says, never again will my land be divided. And never again will there be two kingdoms. Whether or not he's talking about Judah and Israel, whether or not he's talking about the northern kingdom, southern kingdom, it doesn't matter whether or not he's talking about a Palestinian. And so for our audience sake, I know the answer to this question, but everybody says, well, Palestinians. The country was called Palestine. Maybe you can share why it was named Palestine.
Yeah, Palestine is a name that Jesus would have never really heard of, back in his day. And where that name comes from is after 130, 135, 136, at the end of what's called the Bar Kokhba revolt, the Romans, the mighty Roman Empire, had been having such trouble stamping out these little bands of Jewish zealots who just simply wouldn't lay down and die like they had wanted them to, and Emperor Hadrian writes a letter and just talking about the amount of losses that they have as a result of these little this little region of Jews that just wouldn't leave the region or die. And so anyhow, part of what the Romans would do when they would conquer is that they would rename the land after an arch enemy, or after just change the name in general, just to stamp out any type of indigenous. Philistia, which is really the land, naming it after the land of the Philistines, and then through time, it ends up becoming Palestine. But the area of Palestine was always the land of Judea and Samaria. It was always the biblical heart, always where God had chosen it for His own purposes.
It's so fascinating that the world at large doesn't understand this Palestina Capitolina concept of what Rome did, and understanding how Rome, like the Muslim conquerors, were prone to either destroying the sacred areas, sacred places, to break the backs of the people. And Masada is a perfect example of that, both past and future. And as we go up Masada and we walk around, when we come to the very end and I read the oration of, and I say, you think this is ancient history? And they go, yes. But you're going to face the same decision at the time of the Antichrist. You're going to have to prepare, and you need to prepare now. You need to meet together as a family. And you need to talk about, as they gathered together to make this decision, as to what you're going to do as a family, and whether or not you're going to forego salvation to take this mark that we're so warned about. But this is a living monument to those who made a statement that they would never bend their knee to any man, that they would only bend their knee to God. They would never be enslaved. And that's what this whole concept of the reign of the Antichrist at the 3.5-year mark. And so Israel is rich with both past, present, and future visions and foreshadowing of so many things. It's why I encourage people. Now, you've been traveling to Israel now for how long?
For about 20 years.
20 years. Did you go to, are you a licensed tour guide?
I am not, but there's some different people that I work with when I'm there, but just we work together. So I'm more of a tour host, I suppose you could say.
As I am,
Sure.
am. So I use a licensed guide. What was the original calling for you? Go back to your faith journey and what brought you to this point?
It was always something that was in me. I grew up in a Christian home, and just as I was reading through the scriptures, even as a teenager, by the time I graduated a Christian high school, I felt like I had a better understanding of God's heart for Israel and dealing with them the Torah and the prophets than I did of even some of Paul's letters. My heart was just always sort of drawn to that. And on my first trip to Israel, gosh, I want to. Dating myself now. So it was 22 years ago or so. I always knew it would be something significant for me, but I came back from that trip, even though it was just a bus trip, saying, I know where I belong, I know where my heart is at. And so really from there, it was just connecting in with, we're in the land, connecting in with some Messianic communities in the States. At some point, I can't remember exactly when, but the light bulb turned on in me in my high school years. Israel today is the same bloodline as Israel in the Bible. Like, wait a minute, there's some things I haven't something came on and I began wanting to understand the scriptures from a more Jewish perspective, because the God was speaking to, and this is the people that was to demonstrate his character to the rest of the world. The more that I understand what he was doing with that people, then the more I would understand what the heart of God was. And even more so, more of an understanding and a full picture of the Jewish Messiah that was to be ruling the world from one day. For me, it always became not so much of just sort of a side element, but Israel, the more that I had studied, and the more it became in my heart, it became a very central element, as it is in the Bible. So there's a preacher passed away several years ago by the name of Derek Prince. You're familiar with. One of my favorite quotes from him is that to the effect of if you don't understand Israel, you don't understand the Bible. If you're confused about the Bible, it's about Israel. And so for me, there were so many elements that I just simply wasn't taught growing up, involving Israel, involving faith in Jesus, involving the disciples, all of his teachings and how all of that tied into the Torah. There was lots of things that was never really connected. And so for me, Israel was never just a side aspect. It became a very central. And the more that I began to really focus on that and study it, the Lord about it, seek the Lord about it, I feel like the more that my faith rounded itself out, became much stronger, and I just felt like I had a better understanding of God's heart through the Scripture.
Doug, I have to tell you, as a Jew, born and raised in the Jewish community of Pittsburgh, lived in the Jewish community of Atlanta for many years. I came to faith 22 years ago. On behalf of my people, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your heart. I want to thank you for your understanding. I want to thank you for having a Pauline call to open the eyes of the church and those who do not know and do not understand the role of Israel in their own prophetic future. People ask me all the time, when did I convert? I said, what would I convert to?
Yeah, exactly.
It fascinates me that God didn't provide for conversion of Gentiles, but through his grace, he just said, okay, from the two, I'm just going to make one new man. Nobody has to convert to anything. I didn't stop being Jewish when I believed in the Jewish Messiah. That would be illogical.
Indeed.
How can I drain my blood like the oil of my car? You know, I drive a Lexus. If I change the oil from one brand to another, it doesn't change the fact that it's still a Lexus. So I can't drain my blood and put a different blood inside of me. my body is going to reproduce based on my genetic markers, which I have 16 generations of Jewish parents, grandparents, great-great-grandparents, all their history in the Holocaust, all the lineage. So on behalf of that, I thank you, because you bring a deeper understanding to the church, and even to many in the Messianic movement that love the Lord and they love Israel, but they don't really understand really vividly this experience. And so what you've done with this amazing book, Israel Rising, The Land of Israel Reawakens, is you take people who maybe can't go to Israel on a photographic journey of the 70-year history of the independence of Israel. And I've got to tell you that this is a top-notch, first-class coffee table edition of some of the most stunning photography and your narrative. And your contribution to this is your heart. And your heart is contained in every single page. Your descriptions are vivid. Your understanding is spectacular. And I appreciate that so much, because it's not an exaggeration. It's biblically sound. It's not doctrine. It's Scripture coming to life in living color. It's what you and I commit to do when we take people on a journey to Israel. Is we promise them, and I know you've used these words, that when you travel with me to Israel, I'm going to take the Bible from black and white and turn it into living color. And
that's really the only way to describe being in the land, is that you never read the Bible the same. Everything comes to life. And as you well know, there's been prophecies lying dormant for 2,600 years that have been coming to pass in the last 70. And so to me, even with the photo book, people have described it as a then and now book, and I usually stop the conversation and say, I understand what you're saying, but it's significant to recognize that even through the scope of human history, there's no other people group that have any type of ancient writings or old photographs that have prophesied the desolation and the destruction for a certain amount of time to then be revived to a particular end. Not the Chinese, not the Greeks, not the Persians. Only the Jewish people have an ancient writing and ancient prophets that are found in your Bible that talks about when this happens, God will do this, and this, and it's all towards an end. It's all not just simply because He's making the land beautiful again. He has a purpose. He has a destiny for the land and the people, and really for the entire earth. And He talks about specifically in Ezekiel 36 that He's going to revive the land, so that the nations around will look and say that only the Lord would have been able to do this, that He is God. He's again, as He's done throughout the generations, He's using Israel as a demonstration of His character, of what He is like, and that He is faithful to His word, He's faithful to His promise. And so for me, as the author of it, it's not just simply putting out a book or a photo book in time for a celebration, but it was for me a personal journey of documenting with photographic evidence that the Scriptures are true. In the photo, in the book, a lot of the new photos we shot in 2016. When we put the book together, I didn't expect to have it for the 70th anniversary. In fact, it was ready about a year and a half ago, and then there were some legal delays and some permissions that I needed to get that I didn't have. Everything began dragging out, and I began kind of complaining to God, saying, I've got this project, it was on my heart, you're not doing anything with it, it's just sitting here. And as the time came closer, some people got involved, and they said, this is perfect for the 70th anniversary. And I went, I've never even thought of that. God kind of had it in His plan. And so I've really been blessed. That not only have Christians have gotten behind it as well, but in the beginning of the book, there's an Orthodox rabbi. The book, it's really been embraced by the Jewish communities at large. I actually had some Israelis in Tel Aviv who contacted me that were involved in some of the crowdfunding early on, and they very openly said, we're atheists, not really interested in the spiritual aspect, but the stunning. And I said, well, they are, because your Jewish prophets said all of this.
I would love to see the Ministry of Tourism buy this, have every hotel have it in every hotel room throughout Israel and available in the hotel gift shop, you know, the room copy.
Yeah.
I stay at the Dans. I've been with the Dans for a long time
Yeah.
throughout Europe and Israel, and I would love to see this book right in the room of every hotel. You've done a spectacular job. It's a reminder that God is not a covenant-breaking God, but God is a covenant-keeping God. And
That's right.
to our audience around the world, to those watching us in Pakistan right now, for those watching us in Saudi Arabia right now, for those watching us in Israel right now, for those watching us in India, those watching us in Greece right now, all over North America, South America, our friends in Brazil who are watching this program that have been on with us and write to us, our friends in England and Great Britain and all throughout Europe who are faithful followers of this program. You have to remember that God can break his covenant with Israel. What makes you think he couldn't break his covenant with you? And that's your John 3:16 profession of faith. That is a covenant that God made with you. So if he can break his covenant with Israel, what makes you think he couldn't break his covenant with you? So if he's a covenant-keeping God, that is your hope and promise for salvation, is because he keeps his covenants so that you can have the assurance that the one who made the promise to you is the same one who made the promise to Israel, and he doesn't break his word. We're going to take a short break. We're talking with Doug Hershey, author of an amazing pictorial comparison. The exact same shots from 70 years ago, side by side with shots from today. And we're going to show you some of those and talk to you about the companion CD put out by my friends at City of Peace, Yochanan Marcelino, wonderful people who have put together a music CD as a companion to this book that you can listen to the music while you flip through the pages of this amazing book. We'll be right back. Hello, I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our one-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Doug Hershey, author of the amazing, stunning book, Israel Rising, The Land of Israel Reawakens, Ancient Prophecy, Modern Lens. It's a photographic side-by-side journey between what Israel looked like 70 years ago and what Israel looks like today. I've never seen a work like this before, and it was the vision of Doug Hershey himself. Doug Hershey, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me. This has been great.
Thank you. Doug, I'm going to open up to In Horad on page 54 and 55, which I think is a stunning example of the before and after. And let me share with our audience, first of all, the layout of the book. Walk us through what it is we're seeing. This is my right hand, and this is my left hand. And so tell me what we're seeing here.
Yeah, the black and white photo is one that we obtained. It was from, I'm guessing off the top of my head here, about the 1920s, 1930s. And I went to that location. This is in the Jezreel Valley. Went to that location looking more for the growth of the kibbutz that was there, and found the location, and actually didn't really put it all together until I had the photos side by side. The photo on the right is taken from 2016. And to me, what was the most stunning is perhaps one of the things that jumps out at first is that the black and whites on the mountains there behind in the background don't have any trees on them. And the new photo is there's basically a forest. And why that's significant is the very first thing that Ezekiel 36 says to the land. It says that you will put forth branches and produce fruit. And so part of what the Ottomans did in from 1517 to 1917, the 400 years they ruled the region, is that they had this brilliant taxation policy. I say sort of brilliant, kind of tongue-in-cheek, that they would tax the people of the land based on the amount of trees that they had. And so if you don't want to pay taxes, you cut down your trees, and it completely decimates the entire region. Topsoil is blown away, animal populations leave, weather patterns change, and most historians agree that it's during the Ottoman rule there's just the land suffers some of its greatest destruction and desolation. And so one of the things that the JNF, the Jewish National Fund, has done in the last 100, 120 years, their website says that in the last 100 years, they have planted over 250 million trees. And all of those are by hand. And so for Jewish families or even for believing families that have planted a tree in Israel, you're not just simply doing a good work or planting a tree and, as a memorial. You're literally fulfilling exactly what Ezekiel said would happen, that the branches will put forth fruit. And so, as you well know, if you begin planting trees on mountains, that it begins changing the weather patterns, the dew, the moisture, everything begins coming back. So this is, to me, one of the more stunning photos. In that, in the left, you can see a little bit of agriculture that's happening there in the Jezreel Valley. On the right, there's fields, there's actually some fish farms, as you can see in there. The community has grown, but of course, the actual physical land is what is, to me, is one of the most stunning, especially those trees, because somebody climbed those mountains to plant those trees.
Well, that's exactly right. And so when we see what's going on, we saw at Kiryat Shmona in the last war, the burning of trees. This is a strategy to again break the backs of Israel, who have restored the land. God has restored the land, not us, but through the grace of God, our land has been restored. Now, in some of your pictures that are incredibly stunning, they are aerial views. How were you able to capture these? Did you use drones?
No, we actually chartered a helicopter for about 3 hours, and we have some aerial photos of the coastal plains up by the Galilee, some down in over Jerusalem. And personally, for me, it was probably one of the coolest things I've ever done, is to be in a helicopter over the land. It was a small little helicopter about the size of the seated position was about the size of a VW Bug. It was really small, really compact. And the pilot had been an Air Force pilot. And we're, through the course of our flight, to me, one of the most memorable is that we're flying south from the Galilee towards Jerusalem. And we were basically looking at the entire width of the country. So on the left, we could see the mountains of Moab, which is in Jordan. And on the right, we could see ships out in the Mediterranean. And his comment to me, the pilot's comment to me was, he said, we don't, as of right now, he said, we don't have a lot of land, but it's ours. And there was just this sense of ownership of right now you're looking at the entire width of the country as it stands for right now, but it's ours. And God has given it. And he didn't say it like this, but this is sort of what he was communicating, or what I understood him to be communicating, is that after 2,000 years, God has given us back this land and it's ours. And there was just this sense of, of reverence or of ownership or of a man who defended his nation from the air, and protecting his families and protecting the communities below. There was just such a sense of awe and ownership. And so actually in the book, I write a little bit about that. I write some of these little personal encounters of people that I met along the way, and just, the land just doesn't revive by itself, although that, it's a promise that God said he would do it. There's people that actually cause all of that to return, is to cultivate it and sown. And so when the people return, the land physically responds. And so to be able to bring in the human element of the people that were actually involved in defending and bringing the land together was a real treat as well.
Right. One of my favorite photographs, of course, is of the coastal plain on your page 102 and 103. This is just a stunning representation of what is going on there. But there's a backstory to this as well, isn't there?
There is. And this is, to me, it's probably one of my favorite photos in the book. And this being a little bit unusual for the rest of the book, most of them have black and white photos that go before it, but this one didn't have one. But the story behind it is that from this vantage point, you're looking towards the Mediterranean Sea. And so for anybody who's been to Israel, up in the upper right-hand corner of the horizon is a small little town called Caesarea, or Caesarea, as we say in Hebrew. I say that sort of tongue-in-cheek, because if you've been to Israel, you've been to Caesarea. It's a major port city, one of the largest archaeological digs in Israel. But only about 15, 20 minutes away is this view right here. Now
we're talking about Caesarea Maritima.
That's correct,
right.
Out by the coast.
As opposed to Caesarea Philippi.
Correct. Thank you for making that point. Yes. And so the area that you're looking at there in the book is an area that's called the Cursed Land by the Ottomans about 150 years ago. And the reason that they call it the Cursed Land was because the photo that you're looking at, that region 150 years ago, dating back 200, 300, 400, 500 years, it was a swamp. It was a malaria-infested swamp where nothing would grow, no one would live because of the amount of deaths from malaria. And so in the 1880s, when the Jewish pioneers begin returning to the land, they're coming with small bags of gold and silver and money to purchase tracts of land for Jewish communities. And the Ottomans say, we got a great deal for you. You know, we've got some land for you. And so they sell them the cursed land, thinking that they got, you know, a great deal. What are they going to do with it? We just, you know, took their money or whatever. And what happens is that these early pioneers, and they write about it in a lot of their journals of returning to the land, they began planting eucalyptus trees, which absorb, you know, a remarkable amount of water. They begin climbing into the swamps and digging out irrigation ditches by hand. Many of them are dying. Many of them are write in their journals about draining the swamps with soup cans. So I mean, they're literally getting in. Right in the midst of swamp and death. Again, many of them are dying of malaria, but the land begins responding, and soon the land begins growing. They begin planting, things begin growing, and that, again, after 150 years, that's the region that you're looking at. Right now, it's one of the most fertile regions in Israel. If you've ever had a Jaffa orange, most of them are grown in that region right there. You know, some of the water that you're seeing is fish ponds, vineyards, orchards, communities. So the community that's there now and what was formed in that region is a town called Hadera. And it's one of the strongest Jewish communities that's up in the north. Again, so just maybe 20 minutes from Caesarea Maritime. And to me, this is a stark, knowing the history of that region, it's just really stunning looking at that picture, is going, how was that ever called the Cursed Land? That's amazing.
You know, back when you and I first started traveling to Israel, and drip irrigation and many of the breakthroughs that came, the evaporative technologies, the capturing of just the humidity and condensating the humidity. Many know the Complete Jewish Bible by David Stern. His daughter married the man, Avi, who developed this technology to collect water in collectors by directing the wind and retrieving the humidity as low as it might be, grabbing every bit of moisture out of the air and turning it into condensation. And they now grow so many chives that they are now the sole provider to most of Europe as an exported item just in chives. So
that's beautiful.
What most people don't realize is Israel is an agriculturally independent country that grows all of their own food, raises all of their own food products with the exception of one item only, and that is beef. Beef is the only imported food product into Israel. It is agriculturally self-sufficient. There is no other country that I know of. You know, you can live without beef. So they are virtually agriculturally independent. So now we take a look at what's going on in this political situation, which is very political, by a group called Hamas, which in Hebrew means violence. It's now sending these kite bombs over to burn out agriculture. But the foolishness of all of this is that that's the same food which humanitarian aid is bringing in to feed the population of Gaza. It's extraordinary. Now,
and if I could interject there real briefly in talking about the miracle that's happening with the food in Israel. Again, if we're going back to Ezekiel 36, which is some of the premise of the book, there's two places in Ezekiel where God said, in Ezekiel 36 specifically, where he says he's going to multiply the grain and the fruit of the land, and that they will never again bear the reproach of famine in the region or in the land. And so what's happening right now with the desalination plants in Israel? There over 40% of Israel's water usage is being is being produced by these desalinization plants. They're expecting that to go up to almost 70% by the next 10, 20, 30 years. And then almost 90% of Israel's gray water or wastewater is being reconstituted through water reclamation plants, and again going into the drip technology as you just spoke of. And so quite literally for your viewers or for your listeners, what we will most likely be seeing in the very near future is Israel becoming the only drought-proof nation on earth.
Yes.
If it never rains again, they're pulling drinking water for the population out of the sea. And if it never rains again, everything is already being pumped into agriculture. The sun can be shining 365 days a year. And the fields will continue to grow to their maximum capacity of what God intended for fruits and vegetables in the land, and the people will still have the water that they need. Again, it's one of these things that, although God never says drought-proof nation, he says never again bearing the reproach of famine. And that is very, very quickly happening all through this technology, literally in the last 40 to 50 years.
You know, what's so fascinating about that is it reminds me of Zechariah 14, where God says that when the Messiah returns, that every nation will have to make pilgrimage to Jerusalem, beginning
Yes.
with the Feast of Tabernacles, or he will withhold rain in its season from that nation, which will bring about drought and famine. And so
That's right.
when you are drought-proof, you are famine-proof. When you are famine-proof, then your economy is self-sustaining because you're always going to be able to feed your people. Therefore, you have enough labor force to be able to work the land to continue to perpetuate and become self-sufficient. And that's where they are with that. Now, also the repopulation. I'm going to regather your people. And,
Yes.
and for the understanding of our audience, the regathering of the people is an unbelief. God does not say he's going to bring us back into belief. So you are critical of the fact that Israel is not messianic, or the Messiah, Jesus, has not been accepted virally across the land of Israel, is not a part of God's plan and not what he said was going to happen. He said, I'm
That's
going
right.
to bring them back in unbelief. And there are scales that are going to be on their eyes. They will be seeing but not knowing. They'll be hearing but not understanding. This is exactly as God prophesied it. However, there's still approximately 30,000 Jewish believers, and the population is growing at a significant rate, especially over the last 20 years. Doug, we have time for one more shot, and I thought
Sure.
I would use one of my favorite views, because I stay there on Mount Scopus, is the view from Mount Scopus. And what is so extraordinary about this particular picture is this view.
Yeah, that's Hebrew University. There's just one little building there, and for your viewers, when they get the book, what you focus on is the little dome, in the black and white photo there, and finding that little dome over in the right hand side. Again, I mean, the photos really speak for itself. The buildings are there, the trees are growing, and what you'll be able to see when you have the book in front of you is that there's actually Jewish communities on all of those desert hills there in the background as well. And so, again, in the book, there's over 100 photo comparisons of black and white to today at over 25 locations. Sometimes people have said, well, you're just taking pictures of just a certain region or a certain time of year. And that's been some of the arguments even against Mark Twain's writings of saying, well, he was just in a certain region, or he went in July or August when everything's brown. But the fact is, from not only eyewitness accounts, but photos like this, 100 years ago, nobody's there. Nobody cares about Jerusalem 100 years ago. In fact, in Jerusalem, in the Jerusalem section in the book, there's census records dating back to 1844 from the Ottomans, who were Muslim, saying that there's only 15,000 people in Jerusalem, and the majority of them are Jewish. Or from a German travel writer in 1906 that says there's 60,000 people in Jerusalem, and the majority of them are Jewish. And so Jerusalem has always had a Jewish majority throughout the centuries, and again, a lot of that's documented. But again, Mount Scopus there, Hebrew University, one of the most profound photos in the book of just an empty, desolate hillside coming to life again with the Jewish people. And again, Hebrew University, again, being the location where not only just an amazing university, but it's the location on the very day that the UN is voting
Right.
on November 27th. Hebrew University is the location where there is a Jewish archaeologist verifying the authenticity of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Right.
So there's just so much history. There's so much life. There's all of these amazing intertwining facts that only God could have put together at the very time that the land is reviving. It's the entire land, and the story is nothing short of miraculous.
All right. We're talking with Doug, Doug Hershey, author of this amazing pictorial journey and biblical journey through the land of Israel called Israel Rising, the Land of Israel Reawakens. It is a photojournalistic view of Israel with a companion CD. And do you plan to issue a, calendar takes you from April till May of 2019. There's also
Correct.
a calendar. You can get this package. Where can they get the package?
Just the book by itself, if you just want the book, you can find it on Amazon. For the whole package, you can find it on EzraAdventures.com. For the calendar, for the CD, and the book. And the calendar, just to be clear, that what you'll find in the calendar is some of the best shots from the book, and it goes to May 2019 to follow the entire 70th year. And so it has
Wonderful.
Torah portions in it, it has the biblical holidays, and then the music CD has music in Hebrew and English from local artists in Israel, all put together for this project.
Wonderful. Doug Hershey, it was a pleasure to meet you and have you on the program. I'd love to have you back on to talk more about Israel, as you have such firsthand experience, and we can compare notes again at a future time. God bless you, my friend. Thank you for being with us here on Revealing the Truth. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.